74. It's Susan G. Coleman reporting to you live for the last episode ever. Today's topic is the Vietnam War, so we'll start with special guest Tori Komet.
So my question was, how did military conflict divide people within cultures? And there's many answers to this question, but the main one is the domino effect. It started about the mid-1900s and ended about the early 1980s. It promoted at times by the United States government and speculate that if one state in a region came under the influence of communism, then the surrounding countries would follow in the domino effect. The domino theory was used to convince the United States administration during the Cold War to justify that for Americans' intervention around the world. Military conflict causes people within cultures to divide because not everyone agrees with the laws and rules that were being made, so causing people to branch off and divide and do their own thing. By the end of the Vietnam War, the domino theory, people didn't really think it was the factor within the Vietnam War. It was more the nationalisticism, which a reacting movement to the years of imperialism.
The question was, why was 1968 the most turbulent year of the 1960s? And, well, it started off with Tet, which is the Vietnamese New Year. And so, starting off in January, Viet Cong and North Vietnam launched a massive surprise attack on an American air base in South Vietnam and the American embassy in Saigon. And at this point, the Americans just wanted the war to end, so like the people who weren't involved with the war just thought and that we shouldn't be involved. And then after that came the presidential election, and that was a lot of drama because Eugene McCarthy and Robert Kennedy ran for the Democratic presidents, and so that made Johnson quit the race and not continue his next 4 years in office, even though he was probably going to win. And so, in the end, Nixon won the election for the Republicans. And then after that was April 4th, and Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated that day. So, obviously, a lot of African Americans and white supporters of desegregation were really upset about that. And it was just kind of the last thing America needed at the time with the war and the election and all that. And then, a couple months later, on June 5th, Robert Kennedy was assassinated, and he was really influential at this time, so a lot of people were affected by this, and a lot of people were really upset.
Was how did American involvement in Vietnam change during the Kennedy and Johnson administrations? So when Kennedy took office, he continued to support South Vietnam, believing the country was vital in the battle against the communists. In 1963, number of U.S. military in South Vietnam jumped from about 2,000 to 15,000 soldiers, and they failed to shore up the floundering Diem Regiment. And the South Vietnamese created special fortified villages known as strategic hamlets, and they moved the villagers to these hamlets. And this program proved to be extremely unpopular by the people. 3 weeks after Diem's death, Kennedy was assassinated, and the presidency now belonged to Johnson, and he wanted to keep the country, Vietnam, from falling into the communists. August 2nd, 1964, Johnson announced that North Vietnamese torpedo boats had been fired on the 2 U.S. destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin. 2 days later, another attack also happened. After one particularly damaged attacks, Johnson sent American aircraft to bomb North Vietnam. And then my other question was, why did Americans disagree about the Vietnam War? Many people did not like that we were involved in the war because we weren't really important, and it didn't really affect us. And then many Americans felt that it was not a war that was necessary for the security of the U.S. And they also felt that what happened in Vietnam could not truly impact us.
How is political and cultural aftermath different from other international conflicts? Well, it ended in 1973 by making negotiations after the Christmas bombings, which is where a desperate move on America's part. We just bombed North Vietnam a lot, and they were kind of overwhelmed by it, so they had no choice but to negotiate with us. And so that was kind of trying to end the war, and it kind of worked. And then that helped start the War Powers Act, which isn't really used today, but some aspects of it are, which is where it's by law you have to ask Congress before sending troops to war. And that doesn't really happen, but we kind of ask permission to start war and start using military equipment and things like that. But then after this war, we were short $173 billion, which was insane. And then there was 58,000 young Americans that had died from being in the war, and then there was 300,000 injured. And so America kind of just wanted to forget that the war ever happened, so the veterans kind of went unrecognized because they didn't have any welcome back parties because people were just trying to forget about it. So they were disappointed about that, and all the families were hurt by the amount of family members and friends that they'd lost and that didn't get recognized if they did survive. And then the war was also unresolved for families with friends or relatives that were prisoners of war, or POW, or MIA, which is missing in action.
My second question is, should citizens support the government during the wartime? This question is very broad and it's a rhetorical question. There's no right or wrong answer to this question. Supporting the government anytime, especially during wartime, is all about your viewpoint. Not everyone supports the government in wartime or calm time when things are at peace, which is not very often. But then there are some people that support the government 24/7. This question always depends on your viewpoint.
To the last episode of Fox 74. I hope you enjoyed.